which is The Rainmaker from 1997, directed by Coppola, obviously, starring Matt Damon, Danny DeVito, Claire Danes. Quick logline: an underdog lawyer takes on a fraudulent insurance company. I've always loved these John Grisham adaptations back then when I was a teenager or in my 20s, but also as a grown up. I watched this movie actually not knowing that this is directed by the director who made the Godfather movies for sure. But it's definitely in my mind of the John Grisham adaptations. And I watched it because I like Matt Damon. This is sort of, when he's sort of up and coming and
Yeah.
such. And watching it again this time kind of made me remember why this made an impact on me and probably stands out in all those Grisham adaptations, even though this is not my favorite Grisham adaptation. I like The Firm or Pelican Brief or those movies much better actually
Mm.
than this one. I've not revisited this for a reason. That said, though, it has the Coppola quality, which I've been thinking about a lot, even with the Godfather movies, is that it's intimate and expansive and epic at the same time. And he's so good at that, even though like you mentioned, like after this movie, he basically called it quits. So
Right.
it probably was not a happy time, but I think he is able to get to the heart of these people, this place, this time, and what they're going through. Not all of it comes together, specifically some of the Claire Danes elements and that relationship. And I was like, what is even going on? It's like a little bit of sort of misery porn in
Yeah.
some ways. And a lot of the storylines where Matt Damon is involved trying to kind of help these people out and such is like that. It's schmaltzy in that sense. That said, there is like a beating heart to it. And the story is pretty engaging. You are intrigued. The performances are overall pretty good. But what I take away the most is sort of the epicness and the intimacy, kind of at the same time. And that's one of his signature things. So I wouldn't call it a first love. It was more like watching a Grisham adaptation, but instantly feeling that it stands out
Mm.
because of that epic nature of it, which I don't think comes through in the other ones that I actually prefer. They feel sort of thrillery, fast paced, and more sort of about the plot beats, if you will, versus this feels a little bit just like lay back and let this movie kind of wash over you. Sort of, it has this sort of, maybe it's the place too because it's set in the South, I think, right?
Believe so. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it
Yeah.
has that sort of feeling of like humidity and like a good lazy sort of vibe to it, which I kind of enjoy. It's like a good afternoon movie to watch, I think. So that's why I put this on my list, because this is the first movie I saw and it did make a impression on me. Had you seen this before?
Yeah, so this movie I'd seen as a kid too, and it might have been potentially the first Coppola movie I saw as well. I don't
Mhm.
know if I saw this one or the movie I'm going to be talking about next, Apocalypse Now, first, but definitely this movie, if I did see it first, was not because Coppola directed it.
Right.
This was one of those like it's a Friday night VHS rental time, go to the video store. Okay, I also like those John Grisham thrillers, those legal thrillers. So it's like, oh,
Right.
get this. And I remember I hadn't seen it. I saw it last year on my Coppola rewatch. I hadn't seen it since then. I remembered the movie being a lot better than it was upon the rewatch last year and then the rewatch that I just did for this podcast. I remember really liking it because I'm a big fan of the stick it to the man genre of movies where there's an evil corporation and
Right.
somehow the evil corporation loses at the end and they get screwed. Like that's like my favorite type of genre, especially the legal genre. So I had a memory of those beats of it a lot more than the rest of it because I think you're right. Like the Claire Danes stuff doesn't really work, but I definitely agree with you in terms of the Coppola approach to the Grisham books. And actually, I think for me, this is my favorite of the Grisham adaptations. Actually,
Oh
I
yeah.
think the other ones that you mentioned, The Firm or like A Time to Kill, they focus a lot more on the page turner pulp novel aspect
Right.
of what John Grisham does. And I think what this movie does is it does take a step back and focuses on more of the characters. It's like,
Yeah.
what is Matt Damon's journey? How is Danny DeVito's? What is his journey? Why are they kind of doing this? And it's not so much about the plot beats and like, oh no, there's like someone with a knife around the corner or like
Right.
all the stuff that Grisham does put in his books. I mean, I've never actually read the books. I will have to admit, but my mom was a huge fan of them, so I was always surrounded by them as
Mm.
a kid, and I knew Grisham through these other movies, which I always thought were a lot more cheesy and pulpy.
Yeah.
not in a bad way. That's just kind of what his style is. I think Coppola and his approach to this movie was kind of pulling those layers back. I mean, maybe the layers weren't there in the original book. I don't know. But the only thing that doesn't really work for me is all that Claire Danes stuff, which sort of feels unnecessary. I guess it's in there to sort of show what a good guy Matty Damon's character is, because he's doing these other things out of the goodness of his heart and not just going after the insurance company for the money. I think that must be the sort of the point of that. But the cast is stacked.
Oh
Like
yeah.
not only DeVito and Matty Damon, but John Voight. We just talked about John Voight in Megalopolis. He's great in this. Danny Glover just solid as
Yeah,
a cool
amazing.
judge. Mickey Rourke in the beginning of the movie, I think, does a
Right.
fantastic job as like the sleazy sort of ambulance chasing lawyer. So I think this again shows Coppola can bring in the great actors. They all do great performances. And he does able to do exactly what you said, big drama, but also focus on the characters. And I think this movie is a very solid kind of base hit kind of movie. Like he needed it because he needed the money. And this, once he collected that money, he sort of stepped away from Hollywood after this for basically forever. I mean, he hasn't really gone back and made a mainstream film since then. Even Megalopolis was independently financed, like we said. But I think this is an admirable kind of last movie, if this is the last one he makes in mainstream Hollywood, to do. This is like a solid, yeah, yes, it's
Yeah,
paint by numbers, but he elevates it in a certain way.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, it sort of feels like, to your point, like a serious sort of drama picture
Hmm.
rendition of a Grisham novel.
Yeah, yeah.
I prefer the pulpy sort of page turnery, because that's, I mean, not that I've read those books, but that's what those books are. And
Right,
that's
right,
why
right.
The Firm is bonkers, but I
It's
love it so
it's
much
so
for
dumb.
it.
Yeah,
It's, I love it.
it's oh yeah, no, it's like I'm not taking away from. I mean, I love Tom, but yeah, we saw
Yeah,
that movie we talked about on the podcast
I
last
know.
year. First time I'd seen it, just bonkers. Like,
I
what the
know. I
hell is
love
this
it so
movie?
much.
But
But this is,
yeah,
it's a different tone and different vibe. And I think, yeah, if this is the last mainstream Hollywood picture you're going to make, that's pretty good, actually. Solid.
yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's definitely his. You can say this is part of his quote unquote journeyman director phase of just sort of
Right.
taking whatever he can get. But I think that's selling it a little bit short. I think he
There's
does
more there.
yeah, exactly. He does put a little more into this. So I think you cut out the Claire Danes stuff. I think this would be much higher ranked in sort of his filmography. But even with it in, I think it's a solid Coppola that I do recommend people, especially like in legal thrillers, could check this out. Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.